Hello and welcome to the Wellness Connection podcast. I'm your host, Fiona Kane. Today I'm going to be talking about midlife or about being in your 50s and the experience of that and some of the things that maybe we don't talk about. And not specifically about menopause, that will be part of it. And this won't be specifically about women either, although, of course, my personal experience is of a woman. I have patients that are men and women, or clients who are men and women, and I talk to people about these issues. But yeah, I wanted to talk about midlife and some of the things that happen, and some of the maybe the unexpected things, or the things that the challenging things that happen for us. And where I suppose where I'd like to start is by saying that we throughout our life we have different transitions in our life. There's different transition periods. And in our culture, which I'll say Australian, or maybe slash Australian slash Western culture, we don't really have good rites of passage for things like, coming of age or transitioning through menopause and those kinds of things. And it's kind of sad that we don't really have those rites of passage because they are important times. And I feel like what happens then is we kind of just have these experiences on our own and don't really talk about them as much, or understand, not sure what's wrong with us, that kind of thing. So I'll give you a bit of an insight into what I'm talking about. So when you're going through this stage, when you're in your 50s, there's a lot of things that happen in your 50s, and that change everything. And one of those things is, you often, if you haven't already, that is when you start losing your parents. And there's something really unique about losing a parent or losing your parents that shifts the ground from under you. And I know it happens much earlier for some people and all the rest of it. I'm just talking just in general for most people, it's 40s or 50s maybe where this starts happening in their life. And losing a parent it does shift the ground from under you, because it's kind of, that person is a person who knew you better than anyone possibly, or maybe you had a confusing or challenging relationship with that person, or a non-relationship with that person. Whatever the case is, when you've lost that parent, there's going to be grief, and it might be grief for the great person in your life that you lost. It may be grief for the relationship that you didn't have that you wish you had. But essentially, that is your parent. And regardless of whether you had a close relationship with them or not, there's something about, that's such legacy, and that person who was the window into where you came from, and they're gone, right? So it's quite significant regardless of your relationship with that person. It is significant. The other thing that's significant about it is that for a lot of people, when you get to the point where you lose, especially once you've lost both of your parents, well, then you look around and if you're looking at that genealogy chart, you're sitting up towards the top now rather than down the bottom. And up the top now, as in, you're next, right? You don't have your parents and grandparents above you. So now you're the elder. Now you're the yeah, now you're the elder in the family, right? And so there's quite a shift there, because suddenly, instead of having that layer above you, all that assurance above you, if you were lucky enough to have parents who were supportive of you, you don't have that anymore. So you've lost that buffer above you, and now you've as much more. I suppose you feel much more open to the elements in a way, or just much more. Yeah, it's a bit more fragile and a bit less protected, maybe not so protected as you were when you had a parent in front of you, sort of thing. So one is losing parents, which is really challenging and really life changing, and does shift you, and you do shift quite a lot. You lose your grounding, and it takes a while to shift into. I don't say it goes back to how it was. It doesn't go back to how it was. Grief it works like that, but you just shift into a new position. So it's a transition. Again, it's a transition. So losing a parent and losing both parents, they are transitional things that take you to the next place. And along with that, what can often happen is you have the hormone changes that make it a bit challenging as well. Because for women, we normally are making progesterone that's quite good for keeping us feeling calm and relaxed, and that kind of disappears by the time you're in your 50s, and that adds to the sort of feeling, that lost feeling, and that feeling of not being able to maybe. I see what happens all of a sudden is, even though we're at a time in our life where we've experienced so much and we know so much, and in some ways we're quite confident. On the other hand, we just start having experiences where we question ourselves as well, because we're like, we things feel different. We feel different, and maybe we start second guessing ourselves a little bit as well. That can happen as well. The other thing that happens is, because you're going through all these changes. So if you think about it, if you go through the change where, okay, your youth is gone, and it doesn't mean you can't be youthful, but your youth is gone, and you're probably, for women, you've changed over to a place where your childbearing years are gone, if they ever existed for you in the first place. But that gate has closed, that door has closed. And so there's a lot of different levels of grief. And there might also be grief around your career or around your relationships, or not even grief, but just kind of you get to an age where you look around and go, oh, how did I end up here? Bit like that Talking Head song. This is not my beautiful wife. This is not my beautiful. Just kind of looking around and going, oh, okay, how did I get here? This maybe wasn't the plan, or when I planned this, this isn't how I thought it would be. So we look around and we suddenly kind of go, okay, this is the relationships I have or don't have, and this is the career I have or don't have. These are the children I have or don't have, the grandchildren that you maybe do or don't have. And so there's just a lot of things where you look around and you kind of have this awareness that there's a lot behind you and maybe less in front of you, less time, and you've made certain choices that have got you to this place. So there's just a lot of looking around and going, okay, how did I get here? And how do I feel about that? And what's my place in the world? Even, often if you have had children, it's usually when your children are older and they've moved out of home, or they're moving out of home, or they're shifting on with their lives, and maybe they're having children as well. So maybe you're busy being a grandparent, or maybe not. Maybe you're sort of just an empty nester and the children really don't need you much anymore at the moment, and they're off doing their thing. So it is quite a different time where you're sort of thinking about, well, what's the meaning of life? What's my meaning, and what do I want to do with my life? But the other thing that can happen amongst all of this, because like I said, we're in a transition, there's a shift happening for us. And like I said, we do feel like sometimes like our foundation has been pulled out from under us. You can really feel like that for quite a while. And so it often leads to us feeling quite sad, and maybe, quite flat, quite sad. And there's a risk that you might pathologize this when you don't need to. And what I mean by that is, of course, if you are absolutely struggling, you cannot function, you cannot get out of bed, you're having dark thoughts, whatever, then go and get a diagnosis and, yes, pathologize that, because you need more support, you need help. And, obviously that's a different situation. You have developed, depression or something along those lines. But just feeling sad and being in transition and just up in the air and all of that, that's actually really, really normal for this time in our lives. And so there's no need to pathologize that. And so I want to assure you, man or woman, if you're kind of got those, if that's sort of the experiences that you're having along those lines, feeling a bit lost and feeling like things have shifted from under you, and kind of, there might be uh, fear about death, or fear about what your life means, or what your life meant, or your legacy, or all of those things, whatever's going on, it is actually perfectly normal. and it's just part of this transition. So rather than kind of think, oh my God, there's something wrong with me that I need to fix, uh, it is part of the transition. Now, it doesn't mean you can't work on yourself. Obviously, that's what this time is for. The gift of this time is to actually start to kind of assess those things. Where am I in my life? Is this where I want to be? Is this where I want it to be? Can I do something different about it? And it might be actually making a change in your life, or it might be just making a change to how you look at your life. Both are quite valid. So sometimes people do the midlife thing where they change everything, and maybe that's absolutely the right thing to do and what you need to do. But sometimes the change everything isn't actually about the life itself, it's about the way you look at that life. And so what often happens is we we get quite fixed in our idea of what we think success is, or what we think a successful life is. Or we might have in our mind when we're in our 20s, 30s, whatever, that when I reach 50 or when I reach 60 or whatever the age, magic age is, when I reach 40, I'm going to have XYZ, or I'm going to be XYZ. And we have this kind of fixed idea in our mind about what we hope to achieve by that age, or what we think success is going to look like at that age. And then we get to that age and maybe none of that happened, or maybe it happened, but it didn't happen exactly that way. And even if none of that happened, quite often something different's happened. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But what we do is we kind of go, oh my God, I failed. Or, oh my God, I didn't. Or whatever it is, we stick to that rigid plan that we created 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and we get quite fixed on the fact that it must mean we're some sort of failure, or we've done something wrong. And I invite you to think about that, because, first of all, as we know, John Lennon said this: life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. So you can't always just do exactly what you plan to do. You do you plan and you do the best you can, but sometimes life just that's not the cards you get given, right? You get given different cards. So you can't there's a whole lot that's not in your control. So if you're sitting back and not doing anything, then that's not helpful. You need to do something to get where you want to go in life. However, what we do is we make plans and we aim for one place. But if we land in a different place, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different place, right? And I think we get caught up in it's not the original plan, therefore it's no good. But sometimes sometimes it might be no good. Absolutely. But sometimes it actually might be better than the original plan. Sometimes it's just like we thought that we were destined for that, and we're destined for something else. And the something else is sometimes better, or it's better for you, or whatever it is. But we're so rigid in our thoughts or in our ideas about how it should be, whether it's our ideas or whether it's an idea that someone put into our head or society or whatever, but some expectation of where we should be. I invite you to reassess that, because just because that was a good idea, what I thought was a good idea when I was 35, I don't actually think is a good idea now. So I feel very different about, I feel very different to what I did when I was in my 30s. And so any idea that I had fixed in my mind when my 20s and 30s about how my life should look now, it's not necessarily true to me now. So and I encourage you to just think about why you're so fixed with these things, and invite you to reassess your story. And even if you had the greatest plan, and I've recently, one of my sort of acquaintances, I would say, someone I met through networking, young man with a child, and his wife passed away, right? And you couldn't plan for that. You couldn't plan for that, right? So he and the child, they're grieving now and they're readjusting to life without mum. And obviously, that's a massive shift for them. And it's going to change everything. It has changed everything. Now, if now right now they're in the midst of it all, and they're just processing it all, and day by day, which is really appropriate. But if in 20 years' time he's still kind of fixed in it was supposed to look this way and now it's not, they'll be really sad for him because the truth is in life, things change and we need to learn to create a new story. So what we do is over time, and it might be 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, we create a new story for ourselves that says, okay, we still include that person who we love so dearly, who meant so much to us. They're still part of our everyday life. We still hold them in our hearts, but we also live, and we choose to live, and we choose to have joy, and we choose to move on, sort of thing. I don't mean moving on by letting go, like throwing the person away or any of that. I just mean carry them in your heart, but keep going. And so we can't get fixed with it's just, the example I've used for myself is I wasn't able to have children, right? So if I'm 54 now, if I was sitting here saying it's not okay, I didn't have children, that's means I'm a failure. That means I can't be happy with my life. Well, that's not helpful to me, is it? Right. So I can stay fixed there and I can keep saying that story to myself. But what purpose does it hold? So I need a new story. I need a new story for, well, okay, the children didn't happen. So what can where do I find my purpose? Where do I find my passion? Where do I place my energies? And what does my life look like? And all that mothering energy that I have, because women do have mothering energy, I can still use that. I still do use that. I just don't use it towards my own children. I use it with other people's children and other people's grown up children, right? So I still use that energy, but I use it in other ways. So I invite you, just if you've got some story that you're really fixed on, I invite you to just think about that story, and one of two things: either kind of realize that maybe it's not your story anymore anyway, and you actually would prefer a different story, or have a certain level of acceptance if that story is not going to happen, or make it happen if it's something that you really can make happen and you really want to make happen. So there's different, there's acceptance, there's changing the way you think about it, or there's going and doing it. All of those things are completely acceptable. Depends what the story is, doesn't it? But it's just like reassess, because sometimes we're like angry at ourselves because we didn't do XYZ. And is XYZ really what we want to do or where we want to be? And maybe it's not, but we're just telling ourselves this same old story. And one of the things I refer to a lot, but I'm going to refer to it again because it's just so well said, is Ren Gill, who is the artist, the singer that I've talked about many times. In his song Hi Ren, at the end he does a spoken word part, and he's been through to hell and back many times with Lyme disease and all of the associated physical and mental health issues he's had that have gone with that. And one of the things he said at the end of that song, he said that, it was never really a battle for me to win. It was an eternal dance. And like a dance, the more rigid I became, the harder I got. The more I cursed my clumsy footsteps, the more I struggled. So the older I got, so I got older and I learned to relax. I learned to soften, and the dance got easier. It's the eternal dance that separates human beings from angels, from demons, from gods. And essentially, like there's more, but he's just, sometimes we need to soften. Sometimes we need to not be so rigid, and sometimes we need to just know that we thought that we are going to be doing this dance, but we're doing a different one. And a certain level, and I have also referred to Eckhart Tolle before on this as well, but Eckhart Tolle talks about how much of the suffering in this world, the anxiety and the suffering that we have as human beings, is in just not having acceptance of this moment. So we kind of, it's like it should be like this, or I want it to be like that, or it's got you, but we're not just being in the moment and being present in the moment. And sometimes we just need to be present in the moment and say, all right, this is the reality where I'm at now. This is where I thought I should be. Do I actually still want that? Do I want something different? Or even if I do still want that, is that possible? Or is there a different way of doing that? Or, whatever. Or am I going to rewrite things and start again? So just remember that we tell ourselves stories, and sometimes we get really caught up in those stories and we get really fixed on them. And those stories can be really, really unhelpful. And this is in general in life. But so if you're having that experience where you feel like somehow you failed, I would invite you to question yourself on that and, reassess things, as I've sort of just discussed there. And, getting back to in general, the midlife stuff, the questioning that we have at this time, it's really just understanding that it is a transformative time. You are going through a shifting and a transforming experience, and there's going to be struggle involved in that. All transformation has struggle involved in that. And so that's actually really normal. So rather than kind of go, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit sad, or I'm feeling all these funny emotions, or I feel like I'm struggling at the moment," that must mean there's something terribly wrong. I mean, it is a sign. I mean, certainly it's a sign and it's data. So I'm not saying I'm not telling you to ignore it. We need to pay attention to data, and we need to decide what to do with that data. And it might mean go and get something to manage, whether it be medically or herbally or whatever, to manage your menopause or those sorts of issues. Or it might mean go and get a checkup with a doctor and just make sure that, we're healthy and everything's going okay. So I'm not saying ignore. It's data. It's definitely data. So sometimes that data is saying listen to your body more, sleep more, look after yourself, make sure you've got enough nutrients, change your diet, whatever, get more exercise. So, but part of it is absolutely that. But part of it is also going, all right, it is understanding that it is normal when we're going through transition, that there's struggle involved in that. And there's a lot of that sort of thing where we suddenly see ourselves, and as we get older, I find that life humbles you more as you get older, and bit by bit the layers come off, and bit by bit, okay, well, your looks start to go, or you start to put on weight or lose weight, or whatever the thing is that that changing for you, that makes you feel less of who you were before. You can't rely on your looks so much. You can't rely on your youth so much, and layers start to drop off, and friendships change, and friendships drop off, and you suddenly look around, and there's less there's less buffering between you and reality, and you just start seeing reality, you start seeing life, and you start seeing all sorts of things. And so sometimes it can be challenging, and sometimes you get a look in the mirror, and I don't mean physically, although that's part of it, but you get a look in the mirror at what sort of person you are, or how you behave, or what you do. And some of it you might really like, and some of it you might not. So, yes, this is a transformational period, and it is a period where there's some struggle involved, and there is a period where you feel, it does feel like the ground shifts from under you. And so I really just want to assure you that that's really, really normal. If you're really struggling, obviously get help, whether it's with me, or whether you go to your doctor or go to your therapist, or whatever you need to do. I'm not saying don't go for help, because sometimes we need help to manage these times. I certainly have. Like when my mother passed away, I was actually working with two different mentors and coaches at the time, who helped me, very much helped me through that period. One of them was on this podcast a few years ago, Shandu Bickford, and she was amazing. Um, so I actually did pay for professionals to support me through a lot of that transition time, and a lot of that time where I was really struggling, and sort of, didn't know which way was up, sort of thing. So I struggled, and I sought help because I was struggling, and because I was trying to figure things out. And the other thing too is to, the butterfly analogy to sort of explain this situation is, what we do know is, when the uh, caterpillar is in the cocoon before it becomes a butterfly, it needs to struggle so that it can actually fly when it becomes a butterfly. So it needs to spend however much time it is in the cocoon. I don't know, I'm not an expert on this, but it needs to spend a certain amount of time in that cocoon. And over time, it starts to break its way out of the cocoon. And the breaking out of the cocoon, that struggle, is what allows the wings to work properly. So it allows it to fly. Now, if you were to go up to that caterpillar and just cut it out of the cocoon, it doesn't have the struggle, and the wings don't work, and so that butterfly will never fly. So it's the same with human beings when we're going through a transition period. When we're going through a transition, we're going through a change. There's going to be some struggle involved, and that is okay. That is actually really normal. So get support around that if you need to, or just know it's really normal. And maybe what you need to do is start doing some journaling, or start going for regular walks and just clearing your head, or do some yoga, or do some meditation, or whatever it is. But just start doing sort of more self care and be really kind to yourself. The other thing, too, is that it's important to understand that different phases in life require different levels of planning, or of thinking ahead. So, for example, when you're younger and you're planning, what do I want to do, and do I want to have a family, do I want to have or kids, all those things. Maybe you're looking at the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, that kind of thing. But when you go through challenges in life, when you're going through a transition or you're going through grief, sometimes at that point, it's actually more like looking at, what am I going to do today or the next hour or whatever it is. And that's okay as well. I can't remember, there's a terminology for it. I can't remember what it's called. But essentially, it's that window of, depending on how much overload we've got, we can look at just a little bit ahead, or we can look far ahead. It depends on where we're at. And if we're in the middle of a storm, that's not the time where you can kind of look that far ahead. And that's actually something that at Charlie Kirk's memorial, his wife Erica talked about this. She said that she was talking to Usha Vance the day after Charlie died, when they were having his body returned back to the state. And she said to Usha, what am I going to do? How am I going to get through this? And Usha very wisely said to her, you only need to focus on the next 15 minutes. This is going to be 15 minutes. Let's just do that 15 minutes. Then we can do the next 15 minutes. And sometimes in parts of life, all you can focus on is the next 15 minutes. So do that, right? And then things start to calm down. You start to work through things, and you start to build your capacity again. And then you might be able to go day to day at a certain point, and then week to week. And then you can go back into more of a planning and saying, okay, what are we going to do the next year, the next 2 years, whatever. But it is okay to adjust that. So you might get a terrible diagnosis or be going through a treatment. Maybe at that point, it's like, what am I going to do for the 15 minutes? What am I going to do to get through this nausea? What am I going to go do to get through this thing, right? So it's quite okay to like readjust that up and down, back and forward as you need to. And sometimes if you are going through a transition and you are going through a struggle, you need to adjust it back down. And especially if you're unsure of what's going to be on the other side of it. So if you are in that transition and you're not sure if there's going to be a change in your job, or a change in your relationship status, or what's going to be happening in the future, it is okay not to have the answer, and just focus on the next 15 minutes, and just focus on the next day, and focus on just building your capacity. So I've talked about this before, building your capacity, whether it be physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of those different levels, but build your capacity. So spend the time that if you are having this struggle, and you are having, you're going through a transition time in your life, allow yourself to be in that time. Allow yourself to work through it. Allow yourself to, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know all the outcomes. Just work through the period that you're in, and things will start to shift, and then you'll find yourself in a new place, and get the support you need around it, if you need support around it to help you going into that new place. But understand that is normal, as part of shifting and changing and going through transition in life. And all those kinds of feelings and experiences are really, really normal. And, I haven't even talked about the physical changes that women certainly have during menopause. And I think men have a certain level of andropause as well, where they experience just physical changes as well. Your body changes a lot, and it can be quite overwhelming without all the things I just talked about to begin with. So just, I invite you to understand, listen, there's data, your body's giving you data. So if you're feeling certain ways physically, emotionally, whatever, that is absolutely data. Pay attention to the data, and act accordingly, whether it is go and get a checkup, or whether it is get someone to support you through the challenging time, or whether it is just to have an awareness, oh, okay, this is a transition time. All right. So it's not necessarily pathology. It doesn't mean the world, it's not, it doesn't mean there's something terribly wrong with me. It might just mean you're transitioning, and embrace it. So rather than, embrace it, there's going to be a struggle for a while. Embrace it. That's really normal. Understand that that's actually going to, that struggle, and that having an awareness while you're doing it, and really trying to learn and grow while you're doing it, will allow you to build capacity so that when you get to the other side of it, the next choice or the next phase, you're ready for that, whatever that ends up being. But you don't necessarily have to know what that is right now. So I hope that resonates with some of you, and that's helpful. Please always give me feedback. Love to hear feedback. Like, subscribe, share this episode, and rate it and review it on whichever app you're watching or listening on. And yeah, I will talk to you all again next week. Thanks so much. And I like to have, as you know, I like to have real conversations about things that matter. And this is an important thing that experience that we all go through different variations of this, but sometimes it's important to voice that and normalize it, and just let you know that it's something that you can embrace and work through, rather than feel like, oh my God, there's something terribly wrong with me. Anyway, see you all again next week. Thank you. Bye bye.